أفمن يعلم أنما أنزل إليك من ربك الحق كمن هو أعمى إنما يتذكر أولو الألباب.
When the actual reality is that time is not moving faster. The moon still remains exactly as it was all through history. And the month still remains sometime 29 days and sometime 30. That has not changed. The system of time which has come from Allah, in which the moon is centrally located, that system of time has not changed. So it is not time which is moving faster. No, it is our perception of time that it is moving faster. And we are perceiving time moving faster because something is happening to our heart. And so the phenomenon or the perception of time moving faster and yet faster, this is the proof, staring you in your face, that you have been embraced by Dajjal's system of time. The price that you will pay when you are embraced by Dajjal's system of time is that your internal life will be corrupted. The internal life, the heart is no longer beating in harmony with the rest of Allah's creation.
Night has been taken over by light.
Humans' well-being is also compromised by light pollution. The excess light can overwhelm photoreceptor cells in the retina, damaging one's eyesight. Plus, it disrupts natural sleep cycles and causes sleep deprivation.
The internal life, the heart is no longer beating in harmony with the rest of Allah's creation,
leading to a number of health problems, possibly including cancer.
Curtains and sleep masks failed to improve the situation. So in 2018, he complained to the authorities, claiming a right to darkness. At first, they ignored him, even though studies link artificial light to eye injuries, sleeplessness, obesity, and maybe even depression. Some studies of shift workers have indicated that exposure to light at night could increase the risk of breast cancer. But why?
So there's a hormone that our brain makes called melatonin, which in mammals is a signal of darkness. And when we don't get that hormone, when we don't produce that hormone because we're exposed to so much light in our apartment or as a shift worker, then the whole working of this whole biological clock system becomes problematic.
The internal life, the heart is no longer beating in harmony with the rest of Allah's creation.
Sleep, digestion, and blood pressure are regulated by this biological clock. And here, two of the greatest light inventions of recent decades come into play: LEDs and screens. They are very bright and very efficient, and that comes at a price. We may not be able to do anything about bright lights outside, but the lights we have at home are often literally in our hands. The problem is not only brightness, but also color. Blue light from phone displays, screens, and LEDs is similar to daylight. While light in general can suppress the production of melatonin, blue light from screens and LEDs can do so more strongly. That's why experts at Harvard recommend not using bright screens or LED lights for 2 to 3 hours before going to bed, or switching to dimmer and warmer shades of light.
And there's other questions about the exposure to too much artificial light at night not being so good for your health. In fact, it affects the biorhythms of all living creatures on the planet.
The internal life, the heart is no longer beating in harmony with the rest of Allah's creation.
More light at night can actually make us less healthy too. I mean, for hundreds of thousands of years, humans evolved with the rhythms of night and day. Like other creatures, we have a natural biological clock, our circadian rhythm, that's controlled by this cycle of light and dark.
The internal life, the heart is no longer beating in harmony with the rest of Allah's creation.
In darkness, our bodies produce a hormone called melatonin that helps us sleep, it boosts our immune system, and helps a bunch of our organs function correctly. Light at night, especially blue light, can mess with that. And LED lighting, while it saves energy and money, often peaks in the blue part of the spectrum, making this problem worse. Night work has even been classified by some medical groups as a risk factor for many cancers.
Earth's ecosystems have spent billions of years adapting to a day-night cycle.
The internal life, the heart is no longer beating in harmony with the rest of Allah's creation.
That's a sign those bright lights can keep you up by stopping you from producing melatonin. Obviously, that can cause sleep disorders, but melatonin is also an antioxidant, so it's possible that light is actually increasing your risk of cancer as well.
During the entire development of multicellular organisms and plants and animals and vertebrates and then mammals and primates and humans, during that whole time, there was this constant signal coming from the environment. This is daytime, this is nighttime, this is the lunar month. This is the lunar month. This is the lunar month. And in areas that experience strong light pollution, that signal is effectively, has been dramatically changed.
The internal life, the heart is no longer beating in harmony with the rest of Allah's creation.
They sound a little overdramatic. So what if I can't see the Milky Way at night? It's just a little light pollution, right?
The internal life, the heart is no longer beating in harmony with the rest of Allah's creation. Your heart is now out of step with the rest of Allah's creation. So Noor has to come from Allah. And Noor has to pass through, Noor is not some gentleman, Noor is light. Noor has to pass through different worlds of space and time before it can enter into your heart. But it cannot enter into your heart when your heart is out of step with the rest of Allah's creation. It's like a motor car, so the engine needs tuning. Unless you tune that engine, the car is not going to work properly. It might even be able to start. To tune your engine, you've got to return to this lunar system of time. When you're out of step, not only will you not get Noor, you'll now be seeing with only one eye, just like Dajjal, and that's what we have today. Even the graduates of the Darul Uloom are seeing with only one eye. The external eye, and they're internally blind. And when you're internally blind, Dajjal is going to take you for a ride. And when you're internally blind, Dajjal is going to take you for a ride. He's going to show you the road to Jahannam. And he'll make it look like the road to Jannah. And you'll pack your suitcase. Mama, I'm going. I'm going to Jannah. And when you reach to London, after 1 year, 2 years, you realize, oh my gosh, this place is rotting. I was taken for a ride. I thought this was heaven. You reach to New York. You think you made it. Oh my gosh, this is the American dream that I'm now living. I can have my own house and go back to India and I can boast. I've made it already. Dajjal has taken you for a ride. He took the road to Jahannam and he made it look like the road to Jannah, and you swallowed that lie. Why? Because you're seeing with only one eye.
First off, if you live in a big city like New York City, like I do, we can all say goodbye to the stars, unless something knocks the power out like an earthquake did to Los Angeles in 1994. Residents called Griffith Observatory asking why the night sky looked different after the earthquake. They were seeing the Milky Way for the first time.
For example, nights are so bright in Singapore that people can't adapt their vision for darkness. Today, scientists are warning of the dangers of artificial light at night.
Places like Singapore are so polluted by light that people's eyes never fully adjust to the dark.
This kafir on the forehead, as any artist, and we've got so many of them here tonight, as any artist would know, is symbolic. It represents the capacity of the mu'min to look at that which Dajjal creates. As any artist would know, is symbolic. It represents the capacity of the mu'min to look at that which Dajjal creates. For example, he creates a civilization, and the civilization comes to be known as modern Western civilization. And the mu'min will be able to look at modern Western civilization and recognize it to be based on kufr, as though kafir is written on its forehead, as though kafir is written on its forehead. The key, absolute key to the understanding of Dajjal's strategies through which he will seek to accomplish his mission of ruling the world by the hook or by the crook. I don't know whether you have a Malay expression like that. It's located here in this hadith. The Prophet said, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, every prophet has warned his people about Dajjal. And the Prophet Nuh alayhi salam has warned his people about Dajjal. This hadith is in Sahih Bukhari. But I say to you something which no one has ever said before me. Dajjal sees with one eye, his left eye. The artist is already at work, eh? What can I do with that left eye, eh? Dajjal sees with his left eye. He's blind in the right eye. It looks like a bulging grape. But your Lord is not one-eyed. Between his eyes, on his forehead, is written the word kafir. And every mu'min will be able to read the word kafir, whether that mu'min is literate or illiterate. Katib or ghayru katib, whether he can read and write or he cannot read and write, he'll still be able to read the word kafir. We have interpreted this hadith and its symbolism countless times, but since most of you have never had any experience of a direct contact with me before, your only contact with me has been a place called YouTube. I'm going to have to repeat it one more time. Why is it that Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu can read kafir, but Abu Jahl cannot read kafir? Is there something wrong with Abu Jahl's eyes that he cannot read the kafir? Let us send him to the eye specialist. The eye specialist examines his eyes and reports that he has perfect vision. 20/20 they call it. Any eye specialist present here? We have a few doctors here, but no eye specialist. Okay. Well then, how come? If his eyes are perfect, why can't he see? Why is it that Ali can see, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, but Abu Jahl can't see? Is it that Ali is not seeing with these eyes? Could it be that we have other eyes besides these eyes? The modern universities would say, what rubbish is that? Huh? Oxford and Cambridge and Yale and Harvard and Stanford and Sorbonne, and that's nonsense. These are the only eyes we have. This is the only medium through which we can acquire knowledge of external objects. This is the only means through which we can perceive, our eyes. Beside these eyes, we have no other eyes. And so beside this avenue of knowledge, we have no other. This is called, a branch of knowledge is called epistemology. Don't be scared, it's a long word, but never mind. It's the branch of knowledge which studies knowledge. And this is the Western epistemology. That these are the only eyes that we have. But the Qur'an says that in addition to these eyes, the heart can see. And so the Qur'an has a different epistemology. The heart can see. But the heart can only see when Allah puts nur in the heart. And as we mentioned earlier, nur is not sold in the stock market. Allah guides to His nur whomsoever Allah chooses. And so when Allah puts nur into the heart can see. And when there is no nur in the heart, listen to the language of the Qur'an. It is very harsh. Allah says, they have eyes and yet they don't see. They have ears and yet they don't hear. They have hearts and yet they don't understand. Ulaika kal an'am, they're just like cattle. That's harsh language. Bal hum adal, rather they're worse than cattle. They're more misguided than cattle. A people who have eyes and yet cannot see. And so now we can conclude, at least I conclude, you will have to make up your mind, that when Dajjal sees with his left eye, Dajjal is seeing with external sight. And when Dajjal is blind in the right eye, the blind right eye symbolizes internal blindness. That when Dajjal sees with his left eye, Dajjal is seeing with external sight. And when Dajjal is blind in the right eye, the blind right eye symbolizes internal blindness. This is my interpretation. You do not have to accept it. You must first be convinced that it is correct before you accept it. Let me warn you one more time. And so now we are face to face with the beginning of the world of symbolism in Dajjal. Those who follow Dajjal will be internally blind. There are lots of cattle in the world today, I can tell you that. There are lots of cattle in the world today, I can tell you that. And as we proceed with this lecture, you will get the evidence of it. Dajjal's one eye represents epistemology. The left eye is external sight. The blind right eye is his internal blindness. Those who have eyes with which to see, because they have nur in their hearts, would be able to recognize kafir written on the forehead of Dajjal. But when Dajjal appears in human form in 20-25 years from now, and he is in Jerusalem and he declares, I am the Messiah, and you go close to him and look, would you see kafir written on his forehead? No. So those who belong to something called Protestant Islam, you know, they hold on to the literal interpretation of everything, will go closer, get a torchlight, shine the light on his forehead, go check to see if there's any dust on his forehead, wipe it. No, I'm not seeing kafir written on your forehead. You are not Dajjal. No. Secondly, you are not Dajjal because you have two eyes. You have two eyes. Is that so difficult to understand? What happened to you? Is it you ate too much biryani, you can't think anymore? No, it's time. When Ramadan has come, it is time to start thinking. Don't eat your biryani and go home and sleep as usual, because we are being tested and we are failing that test. It is pathetic. I am not laughing and you are not laughing in order to ridicule that Protestant Islam. No. What we're trying to do is to deliver a message again and again and again and again and again, to try to wake them up that your methodology is deficient, your methodology is wrong. No, this kafir on the forehead, as any artist, and we got so many of them here tonight, as any artist would know, is symbolic. It represents the capacity of the mu'min to look at that which Dajjal creates. For example, he creates a civilization, and the civilization comes to be known as modern Western civilization. And the mu'min will be able to look at modern Western civilization and recognize it to be based on kufr, as though kafir is written on its forehead, as though kafir is written on its forehead. Let us now turn to a second hadith of symbolism, and the artists tonight are going to enjoy this. They're going to have a field day. Dajjal comes with two things: river and a fire. Dajjal comes with two things: a river and a fire. But his river is a fire, and his fire is the cool waters of a river. Whosoever falls in his river will have his load of sins increased. And whosoever falls in his fire would have his load of sins decreased. In other words, the river symbolizes Jannah, the fire symbolizes Jahannam. The river symbolizes the road to a life of plenty, to a life of ease, to a life of leisure. And the fire symbolizes a life of hardship, of suffering. So Dajjal takes the road to heaven, the road to joy and happiness and peace and pleasure, and he makes it look like the road to hell. That's not easy to do. You gotta have a PhD in deception to do that. Yeah, not easy. He takes the road to heaven and he makes it look like the road to hell. And he takes the road to hell and he makes it look like the road to heaven. And so everybody wants a US visa. There are some who will sell their mother to get a US visa, or a Canadian visa, or a visa for Sweden, or for Britain, or for Europe, or for Australia, or for New Zealand. That is the land of milk and honey. That is where I can get a job and make plenty money. Those are the lands of progress. Those are the lands of success. And all the cattle of the world ahead for what looks like heaven itself. I was giving a lecture in a place called Pompano Beach in Florida, and some of them in Pompano Beach might even listen to this lecture tonight. And in my lecture I was saying to them, and they're all Palestinians in Pompano Beach, I was saying to them that your children, your grandchildren are at risk because they can be eating bacon and eggs for breakfast, lahmul khinzir, and drinking wine with lunch. And my audience started to laugh. And I said to myself, what is this? This is no funny thing. What's wrong with these people? Why are they laughing? When the lecture was over, I asked the Imam, a very nice man, the Imam, Imam, why were they laughing? I'm saying to them, this is the age of your children and your grandchildren. I said they were laughing because it's already happening. Yes. Dajjal's river is already afire. And when they realize it, and they want to get out to save their children, to save their wives from this godlessness. My son is showing signs of wanting to be a homosexual. I can't tolerate that. let me get out of this land. So then the father addresses his family and says, we are leaving. And the mother says, you can go, I'm staying. And the children said, you know, in America they say, Dad, you can go back to Palestine. We're staying here. That's it. You've lost them. Dajjal has deceived you. What looked like his river was his fire. And who wants to go back to Pakistan when you can live in downtown Long Island? You can live in Manhattan and enjoy a good life. Who wants to go back to Pakistan? Who wants to go back to Egypt? Who wants to go back to Bangladesh? Who wants to go back to Indonesia? It looks like the fire over there, that's the road to hell. Nobody wants to go on the road to hell. And yet, that's the road to heaven. The reason why Somalia is where Somalia is today is because the Somali people love Islam. Yes. The reason why Kashmir has suffered so much more than others is because the Kashmiri people love Islam. That is why Kashmir is suffering. We have a Kashmiri here tonight with us. And so this is symbolism, Dajjal's river and his fire. But his river is a fire. And his fire is the cool waters of a river. Whosoever falls in his river will have his load of sins increased. And whosoever falls in his fire would have his load of sins decreased. He's going to show you the road to Jahannam. And he'll make it look like the road to Jannah. And you'll pack your suitcase. Mama, I'm going. I'm going to Jannah. He took the road to Jahannam and he made it look like the road to Jannah, and you swallowed that lie. Why? Because you're seeing with only one eye. And he took the road to Jannah. Yes, Jannah. He made it look like the road to Jahannam. Who wants to go back to Pakistan? No, I prefer to live in heaven.
فاستجاب لهم ربهم أني لا أضيع عمل عامل منكم من ذكر أو أنثى بعضكم من بعض فالذين هاجروا وأخرجوا من ديارهم وأوذوا في سبيلي وقاتلوا وقتلوا لأكفرن عنهم سيئاتهم ولأدخلنهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ثوابا من عند الله والله عنده حسن الثواب لا يغرنك تقلب الذين كفروا في البلاد متاع قليل ثم مأواهم جهنم وبئس المهاد.
To go back to Pakistan. No, I prefer to live in heaven. This is the problem we have with people who see with only one eye. And so now, when you have been embraced by this corrupt system of time, not only will you no longer have nur in your heart, you will also be internally blind. And Dajjal will be able to deceive you, and you will dance to every tune he plays. That is the bitter sign that you are being transformed into an automaton, or what the Qur'an calls a jasad, a human being who is losing his internal freedom, his capacity to think for himself, his capacity to choose for himself, losing that capacity, and as a consequence, he will join the global godless society, where everyone will live the same way, will dress the same way, will die the same way, and all of them will go into the hellfire, because Dajjal is the one who is controlling the global society. And you live essentially one way of life, one way of life. And that one way of life will take you all into the hellfire. The only one who will survive is the one who separates himself from the global society. To separate yourself from the global society is not easy. No. And that is why our Prophet said, Sallallahu Ta'ala Alayhi Wasallam, I mean, people are not going to be happy with me, for teaching this. He says in akhir, zaman, holding on to Islam will be like holding on to what? Yeah? Hot coals. Hot, cold. Now you use gas stove, you don't use chulha anymore. For a long time, my mother used to use the coal pot. And the coal pot, you have coals. So we know what is hot coals. How can you hold a hot coal in your hand? It's very difficult. He said holding on to Islam will be like holding on to hot coals. Islam began as something strange and different. بدأ الإسلام قريبا وسيعود قريبا. When Islam began, it was something strange and different from the rest of society. And in the end time, once again, you're going to live a strange and different way of life from the rest. So don't follow the crowd. Don't follow the conventional wisdom. So don't follow the crowd. Don't follow the conventional wisdom. Be faithful to the Qur'an. And now we recognize we've gone astray because we perceive in our hearts time moving faster and faster.
قد جاءكم بصائر من ربكم فمن أبصر فلنفسه ومن عمي فعليها وما أنا عليكم